Welcome to week 1 of Art CGI 321. This week, we will learn about navigation, interface, primitive objects, and deformers. This is the first video in a series of videos that will cover those topics. In between, you will find assignments to get you practicing with the software. As you're watching these videos, I would urge you to follow along with your Cinema 4D open, pausing and rewinding as necessary. In addition, every presentation will have an accompanying PDF that is used in the videos themselves. You can download the PDF by clicking on the corresponding link for it. First, if you have not already done so, please complete the Getting Started module found within Brightspace. If you are confused about how to navigate Brightspace, go to the Overview module within our course in Brightspace and check out the PDF from CUNY titled Brightspace Student Tutorial, or the D2L YouTube playlist for learners. Each week you will receive various videos and tasks, which will all follow this format: video presentation and PDF covering the topic, assignments to practice the topic, and a discussion board to share your work with your classmates and interact with their work. So what is Cinema 4D? Cinema 4D is a powerful 3D modeling, animation, and rendering software created by Maxon. It is a powerful toolset that makes 3D workflows more accessible and efficient for design, motion graphics, VFX, AR, MR, VR, game development, and all types of visualization. Here's a video from Maxon themselves.
Cinema 4D is your gateway to another world and another dimension. Cinema 4D is the #1 tool if you're looking for powerful, reliable software to bring your creativity and ideas to life. Whatever you can imagine can be created in Cinema 4D. No matter how complex your idea, you can depend on Cinema 4D from the very first polygon to the final scene, rendering, or animation. If you ever wanted to dive into 3D, now is the time. 3D software in general is complex, but we at Maxon believe, and Cinema 4D proves, that 3D can be mastered by almost anyone. What you see here is renowned as the easiest to use professional 3D software. Everything you need is already integrated. You can create scenes, easily add textures and materials, add the ideal lighting, cameras, and the fast enhanced OpenGL viewport displays everything you need in real time. In the end, literally everything can be animated to meet or exceed any demands a director may have, from simple objects to the smallest parameter deep within a hierarchy. With the physical renderer, you get realistic results you never imagined could be achieved on a computer. And if you don't want realism, well, we even have tools for that. At Maxon, we have made it our primary goal to give artists the greatest amount of creative freedom, with software that provides the ability to work at the highest professional standards, while also being accessible to anyone from 3D beginner to high-end professional. Maxon has given easy-to-use 3D software a name: Cinema 4D.
While this video is very informative, it's a little old. So here's the official 2025 Cinema 4D reel to give you a look at the range of things that you can create nowadays using this software.
Hits it. Hits it.
As a fun fact, Cinema 4D is called Cinema 4D because you have 4 dimensions: height, width, depth, and time. It is designed to be a software for both still 3D images and for animation, hence 4D. We will be exclusively using Cinema for still images, so we're going to stick to the 3 dimensions. You may be used to working with a 2D workspace that has X, left and right, and Y, up and down. In Cinema 4D, we will be working with all 3, which adds Z, forward and backward. As you can see on the grid, if you were to be plotting points on an XY grid, you only have to worry about left and right and up and down. But making it 3D, now you also have to plot backwards and forwards. Unlike 2-dimensional shapes, 3-dimensional shapes have thickness or depth. Now that you know what Cinema 4D is and that we will be working in a 3-dimensional workspace, let's jump into the software. This is the logo that you will see once you install Cinema 4D. Be aware that Maxon has an application called Maxon One, which houses all of their various softwares. You need to have that installed in order to install Cinema 4D. Think of it as Adobe's Creative Cloud app. Once you open Cinema, the first thing that you will see is the Quick Start dialog. In here, you can see suggested videos from Maxon as well as your recent files. You can create a new file or open an existing one. You can also just close it out. And then here, you're going to see the user interface. And here it is with all of its parts labeled. This is Cinema 4D version 2025, but every assignment can be completed with an earlier version of the software. Sometimes some computers work better with earlier versions, so it's totally okay if you have to install the previous version of it. It is important that you keep in mind where the various tools are located, so that if a video tutorial tells you to alter the attributes, you know to look at the Attributes Manager. In addition, some of the tutorials that I will give you may be from years ago, so the interface may look slightly different. Because of this, it is crucial that you know the general idea of where the different parts are, so that you know where to go if they are somewhere else in a different video. I will be going down the list one by one. Some I will go over in depth in this video, and others will be left for a later time. Let's begin with the viewport, which is your workspace in Cinema 4D. It is the equivalent to your canvas in Photoshop as an example. By default, you're brought into Cinema 4D in your perspective view, which is the view that most closely matches the human eye. It allows you to view your objects in all 3 dimensions at once. On your viewport, you will see your work plane. This is an infinite grid that is there to help orient you. On the bottom right, you will see grid spacing, 50 centimeters. And this is telling you that between each of these, there are 50 centimeters, which is approximately 19 inches. Later on, when we learn to zoom in and out, you will see the spacing change. This is helpful when you're working to scale. Quick note, while doing video presentations, sometimes I'm only going to put the presentation slide for your reference. If you want to read the entire thing, make sure that you download the presentation PDF and keep it for your records. Let's take out a cube to serve as our visual anchor. In the Create tools, you will find the Primitives menu under the icon of the cube. Click on it once, and this will take out a cube. All objects come out at 0 in X, 0 in Y, and 0 in Z. This means that they are generated in the center point of all axes, and therefore are at the center of your workspace. Okay, so now that we have a visual anchor, let's learn how to move around it. First, and the easiest way to learn how to move around Cinema 4D's viewport are your Move Tool icons. A little disclaimer is that while it is totally fine that you use these buttons for the first part of the course, I highly recommend that you get familiar with the shortcuts. By the end of this course, you should be able to navigate around the viewport using shortcuts only. There are 2 ways to navigate using shortcuts: the left-hand Alt key and the right-hand left click. This is if you are a righty. I will go over them as we go through the icons. Starting with the panning icon, left click and leave it pressed, move your mouse in circles, and you will see that when you pan, you move parallel to your crosshair, which is this plus sign at the center of your screen. Now, for the shortcuts, try both and see which one you prefer. The first method is holding the Alt key on your keyboard and clicking and holding the middle mouse button on your mouse. The second method is by clicking the one key on your keyboard and clicking and holding the left click on your mouse. Next is zoom. Again, let's begin up at the icon. Click and leave the icon pressed and move your mouse towards the left to get further away from your crosshair, and towards the right to get closer to it. Zoom actually has 3 shortcuts. The first one, hold the Alt key on your keyboard and click and hold your right click on your mouse. Left is zooming out, right is zooming in. The second way is by holding the 2 key on your keyboard and clicking and holding the left click on your mouse. The third way is by using the scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom in and out. Because of these shortcuts and many others, I recommend always using a 3-button mouse when working in Cinema. If you have an Apple mouse, make sure that you activate your 3rd button. Finally, we have rotate. Rotate allows you to spin around your crosshair, so click and leave the icon pressed and spin around. The shortcuts for rotate are hold Alt on your keyboard and click and hold the left click on your mouse. The second is pressing the 3 key on your keyboard and clicking and holding the left click on your mouse. Please make sure that you're following along with me while practicing these shortcuts. Personally, I prefer doing the left hand Alt key method because I feel more comfortable only holding one key on the keyboard, Alt, and then making the other decisions with the mouse. But you may prefer 1, 2, 3 and the left click, so that your decisions are being made by your left hand instead. It is 100% up to you, but you should force yourself to practice these even if they are difficult in the beginning. Whenever you're working in Cinema, you should aim to have both hands active, one on the keyboard and one on the mouse, like a musician playing the piano. Before we go to the last icon, let's discuss the axis. When you took out your cube, did you notice the colorful lines within it? Those lines make up the cube's axis. An axis is a fixed reference line for the measurement of coordinates. In Cinema 4D, we have 2 different axes, the world and the object. The world axis is the coordinate system of the work plane. This system is unchangeable regardless of how many objects you add or how many times you rotate your camera, and therefore it can guide you similarly to a compass. The world axis will always be at the exact center of your work plane, so 0 in X, 0 in Y, and 0 in Z. Notice how the world axis stays the same as you move around the viewport. On the top right, you're going to find the world axis legend, and this helps you see which color is which axis. Up and down is Y, which is green. Left and right is X, which is red. Backward and forward is Z, which is blue. The axis legend follows the exact position and rotation as the world axis when you move around. So even if I'm completely rotated upside down, I know where my positive Y is. Now, the object axis is the coordinate system of a specific object. It follows the direction of an object and can therefore follow your object's alterations. The object axis is always at the center of your object, and the color coding remains the same. Y is green, X is red, Z is blue. In addition to the regular XYZ, the object axis has 3 triangles called the axis bands. These axis bands allow you to select 2 directions at the same time. If you hover over either the Y, X, or Z axis arrows or the axis bands, you will see that they appear highlighted white. This highlight is to show you which direction will be selected on mouse down, meaning when you click on it. So, to further show you the difference, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and quickly move and rotate this object. Here you can see where the world axis stays the same, while the object axis is twisted. Okay, so now let's go back to the 4th icon. This 4th icon is the 4-panel view, which is different as instead of helping us navigate within the viewport, It lets us change views. Like I mentioned before, perspective view lets you see all 3 dimensions. If you click in the 4-panel view, you're greeted by the viewport being split into 4 views: perspective, top, front, and right. Top, front, and right views are flat 2-dimensional views of your 3D object. They are called orthographic views. Clicking on the 4-panel view of each of these takes you to that specific view. Top shows you your viewport from above, which shows you the Z and X axis. Front shows you the front view, so only the Y and X axis. And right shows you the view from the right, so Y and Z axis. Switching between these is extremely helpful when you're working on a specific side of your project. It's also helpful for placing and organizing your object in the viewport. Since navigating in perspective view, it is a 3D space, so it can be a little bit disorienting at the beginning. Make sure to practice moving around the viewport for a while. When it comes to Cinema 4D, practice is crucial. And if you're not following along and practicing on your own, you will get left behind. Going back to our user interface, and let's go over some of the managers. The Objects Manager is where all of the objects that you take out in Cinema 4D will live. As you can see, my cube is already there, and it is showing me the icon of a tiny cube and the name cube. You can change your object's name at any time by going to this manager and double-clicking above an object, similar to any computer file. You can also delete any object that is there by clicking on it and having it selected and pressing delete on your keyboard. Below that, we have the Attributes Manager. Here you will see the attributes or parameters of every Cinema 4D object and tool that you select. We're going to go over the attributes a little bit later on. Down here, we have our Coordinates Manager. It is hidden in a button that you have to toggle open and closed, and it lets us see where in space an object is, as well as how much of that space is being occupied. The X, Y, Z are your axes. The first column is the position of your selected object. The second column is the rotation of the object. And the last one is your size. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later on. In another hidden menu up here that is toggled by a button, we have the Materials Manager. This is the place where all of your materials live. We will cover this more in depth near the end of this presentation, as well as later on in the semester. Then continuing counterclockwise, we have the Workplace tools, the Enable Access button, and the modes. For now, you want to make sure that you're always in model mode. We will talk about these at a later date. On the leftmost portion, you have your Undo and Redo buttons. Your Undo erases the last step done, one step at a time, and the shortcut for this is Control or Command Z, depending on whether you're in a Windows machine or a Mac. Become friends with this shortcut. It will definitely come in handy. Then you have Redo, which brings back any step that was undone with Undo. Here you have the Transform tools, which are tools that allow you to transform the object in your viewport. Let's use our cube to begin learning these. The first one is the Live Selection, which allows you to select objects, and later on, points, edges, and polygons. If you have multiple objects outside, you can switch between them by using the Live Selection. Notice that when an object is selected, it is highlighted in orange. The shortcut for this tool is the number 9 on your keyboard. The Move tool allows you to move your selected object or component anywhere in the viewport. The shortcut for this is the letter E on your keyboard. With my Move tool selected, I can see the object's axis, the 3 arrows. If I hover over any of these arrows, they're highlighted white, which is a visual cue that this is the arrow that's going to be selected. I can select a specific arrow by left-clicking and holding it, dragging it around, and my object will be moved exclusively in that direction. So if I select the red arrow and click and drag, my cube will be moved in X. Even if my mouse is going up and down, my cube is only going to be moved in X because I only have the X axis selected. We also have the axis bands, which, like I mentioned, allow you to select 2 directions at once. As a way to help you remember, the axis bands are colored after the one dimension that they do not move in. So hovering over the blue one shows me that it's going to move my cube in X and Y, but not in Z, which is the blue axis. The last way to move is by moving all of the axes at once. You can do this by left-clicking anywhere on your object that is not the axis, or anywhere outside the object on your viewport. Notice how now they're all highlighted. Take a look at the position in the Coordinates Manager and how it is changing. Next up, Rotate tool, shortcut R. This tool allows you to rotate your object or elements. You can select a specific axis color and your rotation will happen around that axis, meaning clicking on the green rotation will cause your object to spin around the Y axis. If you click anywhere inside of the rotation sphere, but the rotation axis itself, the rotation will follow your mouse and move in all directions at once. Next up, we have Scale, shortcut T. The Scale tool allows you to resize the selected object or element. For now, it's a little bit lackluster to select a specific axis, as we can only make it smaller or bigger in all directions at once. However, this will become more powerful later on. For now, clicking and dragging away from your object makes it bigger, and closer to your object makes it smaller. In addition, you can scale your object by using the small yellow dots near the axis. This does allow you to scale your object in one dimension at a time. Since we are transforming our object, I want to mention the axis locks. If any of these are pressed, that specific axis is locked and you won't be able to move in that dimension. These are specific to what tool you're using. Notice how it slightly dulls the color of the axis that is locked. The shortcut for these are the corresponding letters, so X, Y, Z. Unless there's a specific reason that you want to lock an axis, try to steer away from using these. However, I wanted to mention them as sometimes they get locked mistakenly. So now you know where they are and how to toggle that on and off. Then we have the History button, which shows you which tool you currently have selected, and if you click and leave it pressed, it'll give you a history of your most recent tools. Moving on, we're not going to use any of these tools in this video, but I do want to quickly go over them so that you know what they do. First, we have the Null button, which is a relatively new addition to the Create bar as it previously lived within the Primitives menu. The Primitives menu is the menu that contains all of our primitive objects. In the Splines menu, you will have a series of parametric splines as well as tools to create your own. The generator objects are reliant, which means that they depend on other objects to generate their surface. MoGraph is a menu that contains various tools most closely connected to motion graphics. Fields is a menu that contains fields, which are elements mostly used for animation. Deformers are tools that deform the geometry of other objects. Where the sky icon is the menu that contains numerous objects that aid in completing your scene. The camera menu contains virtual cameras with settings similar to real-life ones. The light menu contains various sets of lights to light your scene. Let's go back to that cube. Looking at the Primitives menu, you will see a small arrow on the bottom of it. Anytime that you see this arrow, it means that this is a menu that you can toggle open and there will be more things found within it. Here you're going to find the rest of the primitive objects, such as the cube, the sphere, the tube, and more. A primitive object is a type of parametric object, which means it has parameters or attributes that can be altered within the Attribute Manager. Primitive objects allow for infinite alteration of their attributes without fear of permanence, meaning you can always go back and change it. If you don't already have a cube out, take one out by clicking on the menu's initial button or by clicking on the Primitives menu and leaving it pressed and then letting go of the mouse on top of the cube. With it selected in the Object Manager, let's look at its attributes in the Attributes Manager. By default, we start seeing the attributes in the Object tab, but you also have Basic, Chord, and Font tags. Let's focus on the Object tab, and then we'll look at the Coordinate one. In the Object tab, you will find the properties unique to the object selected. In this case, the cube. The values for size X, width, size Y, height, and size Z, depth, define the size of the object. You can change these values by typing the number in, pressing the arrows, and/or selecting the little dots that we talked about earlier. Please note that anytime that you select a new tool, you will see the attributes of that tool. So if you want to scale your object and you go and press T for the scale tool, you have to once again click on the cube in the Object Manager to be able to see the attributes of the cube. Segments add subdivisions to their respective side, X, Y, or Z. These are important when further editing the cube, but just to give you a visual of what they are, they separate your cube into smaller segments. Separate surfaces will create separate objects from each side of the cube. Fillet rounds the object's edges, which is incredibly important for realistic renders, as lighting hits round edges very differently than 90-degree edges. Fillet radius determines how much it is rounded, and fillet subdivision makes the fillet smoother by giving it more segments, or sharper by reducing the amount of segments. Then we have the Coordinate tab. The Coordinate tab is an extremely important one to know, as it is identical for every single Cinema 4D object. First, you have PX, PY, and PZ. These stand for the position of the object in their respective axis. Notice how they change as I alter the cube. You can also write in specific numbers here, or use the arrows to change the number. Then we have RH, RP, and RB. These stand for the rotation of the object in their respective axis. By default, this is set to HPB, which is the rotational axis for heading, pitch, and bank. But H is X, Y is P, and B is Z. Lastly, we have SX, SY, and SZ. These stand for the scale of the object in their respective axis. This does not alter the size of the object itself. Instead, it scales the object based on the object's current size. Let me explain this further. Take a look at my cube. In the Object tab, you can see that the size is 200 by 200 by 200. If I go back to the Coordinate tab and put a 2 in the scale of Y, the cube got bigger. However, going back to the Object tab, you can see that the Y remained the same. So what happened is that the size in Y of the object got multiplied by the scale, which is 2. And that gave me 400, which you can see in the Coordinate Manager. Once again, make sure that you're playing around with these attributes yourself. Don't just take my word for it. Then let's shift gears a little bit and talk about materials. Materials are the colors and textures that you can create inside of Cinema 4D. We will do a very basic introduction to materials just so that you can color your assignments. Materials appear on the Material Manager. Clicking on this little bubble icon on the top right, you can toggle that open. Before we talk about materials, we need to discuss the render engines briefly. After Cinema 4D's version 2024, Redshift is enabled as a default renderer in the render settings. Redshift is a render engine that delivers photorealistic images, but can really only showcase its quality when Redshift materials are used in conjunction with a Redshift camera and special Redshift light sources. Redshift is pretty advanced and it could be its own separate class. So for the purposes of this introduction, we're going to switch back to the standard render. It is important to understand the basics of materials, lighting, and rendering before using more advanced rendering. If we have the Redshift renderer on, the materials will be Redshift materials. And if we switch to a standard renderer after the fact, we will lose those materials. So it is important that we switch this out before making materials. To do this, click on the icon for the render setting button, which will open the render setting window. Look for the renderer dropdown and select standard. If you want to save this as your default so that every time that you open Cinema, you will be in standard, follow these steps. Number 1, make sure that there is nothing on your scene. It should be a brand new scene. You shouldn't move your camera or add any objects. We're about to save a default starter scene. So if there are any changes on your viewport, it will open every single time. I will bring up a brand new scene by going to File, New. Change the renderer from Redshift to Standard. Go to Window, Customization, Save as Default Scenes. Back to our materials. Now you can make your materials and they will be standard materials. To create a new material, simply double-click on the Material Manager or click on the plus icon. A thumbnail is displayed for each material, which by default shows you how the material will look on a sphere. To apply a material to an object, simply select it from the Material Manager, click and drag it on top of either the object in the viewport or the object in the Object Manager. In the Objects Manager, when an object has a material on it, the thumbnail of said material will appear next to the object. Like I said, very basic, so we will only be altering the colors for now. Once you have a material, you can change its color by using the Attributes Manager, and you want to stick to the Color tab. Only alter HSV, which stands for hue, where on the color spectrum, saturation, how vivid or intense, and value, how bright or dark. Now let's talk about turning in assignments. To turn in an assignment, you need to upload both a Cinema 4D file and a render. If you don't upload either of these, you will automatically only receive half of the possible grade for the assignment. First, let's learn how to save a Cinema 4D file. To save your file, first go to File, Save, give it a title, and select Save. This gives you a computer file with the extension .c4d. This is your Cinema 4D file. A faster way to save is using the shortcut Ctrl+S or Command+S, which takes you directly to giving it a title and saving it. Then we have rendering. 3D rendering is the equivalent of exporting the work done within a software to an external image or video. We will cover rendering more in depth in future weeks. Today, we're only going to talk about the basics. There are 3 icons up here which are called your render tools. We already discussed how to change your render settings from Redshift renderer to standard renderer. Please note that I will not accept any work in Redshift, and I will ask you to resubmit in standard. Again, any material that you create in Redshift will be lost once you change to standard, so make sure that you change to standard before you even start. The icon on the left is your render view, which gives you a viewport preview of how the final render will look. So here you see my cube is on the right side of my viewport, and I will press the render view shortcut, Ctrl+R. The background will now go black because I don't have any other elements such as an environment or a floor or anything like that, and the default background color of Cinema is black. As you can see, whatever I see on the screen will be what will be rendered. I see that thanks to my render preview, now that I know what it will look like, I can move on to the next icon, Render to Picture Viewer. Clicking here will render to a separate window, the Picture Viewer, and from here is how you can save your file to your computer. To finalize your render, you want to find the Save Image As button. This opens yet another window which will allow you to alter further settings. All that you want to change here is the format. By default, it is set to TIFF. You want to change that so that it is JPEG or PNG. Click on OK, give it a title, and save. The final icon is the render setting, which we already talked a little bit about, but we're going to cover more about it later on. So here you see my Cinema 4D file and my render. These two are what I want you to upload for your assignment. Some assignments are only going to ask for one render, while others may ask for multiple renders from various angles. These last few slides are tips and tricks from today's presentation. First, some shortcuts. Some that I did not introduce earlier are O, which allows you to jump to your selected object. So here I am jumping to the specific cube that I have selected in the Objects Manager, even though I'm very far away from it, by just pressing O on my keyboard. Control-C and Control-V allow you to copy and paste objects respectively. You can copy an object after selecting it in the Objects Manager, Control-C to copy it, and then Control-V to paste it in the same Objects Manager. It will be pasted in the same place the original one was. If while playing around and navigating the viewport, your camera got all twisted and messed up, you can reset this easily. Go to the View menu on the top left and select Frame Default. Lastly, I have encountered that students sometimes change their work plane without noticing, so to fix this, go to your locked work plane, click and leave this pressed, and select Align Work Plane to Y. This will reset your work plane to be flat. To close your Cinema 4D file, you want to go to File, Quit. Make sure that you are always saving the latest version of the work that you are finishing when you're quitting Cinema. And that's the end of this video. Go on now and practice.